What's up, my boys? We done messed around and opened up that T-valve on MX bikes. Oh, no. Oh, no. Man, it's funny when you think back to all them guys that thought I was never going to be able to figure this game out. Oh, man. It's quite funny, isn't it? And by the way, just to remind everybody, I'm still barely even playing this game, okay? I came in here and ran 30 laps on this track at the most, just enough to get around it so I could get the footage to make the gameplay for this video here, okay? We're still not, super hardcore, like, let me get in there every single night on MX bikes and let me really try to go fast in the game. We're still playing this game like once a week at the most, okay? So just wanted to kind of clarify, my how much I'm playing the game right now and all of that, because I think a lot of people, now that they see what I'm doing in the game, they're going to get this idea that, oh, well, now Spencer's really playing it like hardcore, and that's still not the truth. I just wanted to, make that very apparent. We are still under 200 hours in this game, okay? But anyways, we got this track review on the Yamaha test track. Okay, this is made by Stone Rider. Pretty sure same dude that made the Air Rail SX training track that just came out. These are two very, very similar Supercross tracks. So I just want to give my own little opinion on it to potentially help, dude that's making all these tracks for the Pro Supercross series next year. Okay, I want to really get into those little nitty-gritty little details of certain elements of the track to, tell what I think would help with a pro Supercross style track series and that sort of thing. So first things first, these whoops on this track are without a doubt better than the ones that were on the Air Rail test track, okay? You're finally starting to get that proper spacing in between each individual whoop, right? And it makes it feel so much more natural. I felt like those whoops on the Air Rail training test track, it was like that was just 100% designed around, oh, hey, all you boys think the whoops are super easy on MX bikes, so let me come in here and just fuck up your day real quick, okay? Those whoops on the Air Rail test track felt more down the janky road than, to me personally, than they felt more just like proper, skill gap whoops for MX bikes, whereas these on this Yamaha test track, they got a little more spacing in between them. They're not so close together. They just feel so much more natural to me. They feel so much better to me on this track right here than that Air Rail training track. Stick with this kind of whoop spacing, okay? For whatever kind of, replica Supercross tracks you try to make in 2022, stick with this kind of whoop spacing right here. Please. These are way better, dude. These whoops right here are way better. Everything about them is better. So that's one element to it. But the other thing is, I still think overall, yes, they have made massive advancements with these track designs. When you go back and look at the Supercross tracks in this game from like 3 or 4 years ago, they've made massive gains, especially over this past year in the game with designing the Supercross tracks. They've made massive gains, don't get me wrong, okay? But I still think they can expand that track scaling a little bit more. I'm not talking a lot more, but a little bit more. I think every aspect of this track scaling-wise could be expanded like 10%, 15%, and it would only make everything more fun. It would only make everything, feel better. Certainly on a 450, I do feel like the Air Rail training track and this Yamaha test track, both of them, the scaling of them seems to me more like it fits more like a 250 in the game than it does a 450 with every element of it, like how tight the corners are. I feel like on these two tracks, the Air Rail test track and this Yamaha test track, I feel like when you're on a 450, it's like it's all you can do not to overjump stuff. And when I say it's all you can do, I mean, it's almost like when you get in the corner, you feel like, oh my God, I'm going to have to blip the throttle and be like 25% on the throttle to not make this thing overjump something. You know what I mean? It's like with how tight the tracks are and how that scaling's, more down that 1-to-1 scaling road. When you're on a 450 in the game, it really feels like you can't even remotely open up the throttle on the 450. I'm talking like not even a little bit. Damn, baby, all I need is a little bit. I'm talking like you can't even do it hardly any, and it feels like you're just going to rocket off of the track. You're going to rocket into another dimension or something. I feel like if they expanded the corners just a little bit, give you a little more room to work on the track on a 450, it would just make it feel better on a 450, right? So I'm real interested to see how they progress that overall track scaling, because typically in any of these games, and it happened on MX Simulator as well, they start off with a lot smaller of scaling. The jumps don't quite have the peak to them. The whoops don't quite have the peakness to them. The corners are pretty tight, and and then it just develops over time. The scaling gets a little bit bigger, the whoops get bigger, the jump peaks get bigger, makes the tracks a little more separating, and I'm interested to see how, the ARL guys and everything, how they develop that over these next couple years in the game. But I still think there's room to grow, is what I'm saying. I don't think this is just like, okay, this is perfect, don't ever do anything to it. I don't necessarily think that, at least not for a pro AMA, fucking Monster Energy Supercross track level replica stuff. I still think you can expand that scaling a little bit. And some of you guys might be saying, well, this is at the Yamaha test track, da-da-da-da. Well, I'm not just talking about this track. I'm also talking about that ARL test track. They both have very, very similar track scalings to them. They're almost the same exact track, really. Except one of them's just got kind of a little bit different off track, but I think they're identical as far as the dirt texture and the look of everything and the scaling. It's all pretty similar, right? And that was the track that they, came out with to say, this is what you can expect with the 2022 Pro ARL Supercross Series. So that's why I'm going in here and talking about these different things. I think you need to expand everything another 10 to 15%. I'm not talking a crazy amount, talking just a little bit more, And I think it's only going to make everything more fun. It's going to make you, like whenever I'm going around the ARL test track or this Yamaha test track on a 450, I'm dead ass when I say it's all I can do not to override the track on a 450. It's all I can do, man. It's like, oh my God, I can barely even get on the gas, and I'm like all the way across the track, I still think they can expand that scaling a little bit, but overall, for MX bikes, the ARL test track and this Yamaha test track, this is definitely opening up the doors for the game a little bit that I don't think necessarily were there beforehand, certainly in the whoop category. No, this is not like, oh my God, these whoops are just as hard as MX Simulator now all of a sudden. I still don't believe that or anything like that, which is fine. That's perfectly fine. You know what I mean? I don't have any problem with that. I'm just saying, just because I'm saying now they're starting to get some whoop skill gap and stuff like that, I want to make it very clear. I'm still not saying this is like, well, yep, they got the skill gap to MX Simulator or whatever. No, I still don't think that. But I do think it's progressing in a good way in the game for what MX Bikes is. You know what I mean? But yeah, with the 30 laps I put in on this track, there's probably a couple rhythms I could have hit bigger or whatever, but for the most part, I was getting around it. But yeah, decent little track right here. By decent, for MX bike standards, pretty fucking good track right here. But yeah, I think the corners, they cut pretty tight on this track. They really do. They cut tight, especially right before that really long rhythm section. That one you got to be real careful with not over jumping that triple into that corner. A lot of places you got to be very careful in not over jumping that last jump in the rhythm, or you will go right off the track. The finish line's pretty small. You got to be real careful not over jumping that. Even the main Supercross triple is very small. You got to be real careful and not over jumping that. There's a lot of spots on here. I think those are really the biggest places that I think could be expanded like as far as jump scaling, is the finish line and the main Supercross triples. If you're on a 250, you should still be able to hit everything. I mean, I don't think there's anything on this track that is like really necessarily quote-unquote 450 specific. You know, I still don't think they're getting into that kind of category yet as far as like rhythm sections and stuff. I mean, there may be something like right after that Dragon's Back, you may be able to jump completely over that tabletop if you do some fucking crazy wheelie up over the Dragon's Back and pop up over that tabletop. There may be a quad potential right there. That's still something I haven't really got fast enough on, is, you know, them Dragon's Back into a jump section. Those seem to be a little bit tricky, you know, in any kind of motocross game. But yeah, that triple before the finish line, I feel like is pretty damn good, in the sense of it feels like you have to huck the bike to be able to get it to get that triple in. At least for me personally, it feels like that. I think a lot more of your standard triple in rhythms need to have more of that feeling of, you know, feeling like you have to huck the bike. You can't just go around the corner and get your momentum and jump that triple in, you know. It should feel a little more like you got to huck the bike like the triple does before the finish line, right? That's more like how any kind of triple in should feel, you know. It should feel like you got to get the momentum and huck the bike, not just get the momentum and do nothing over the jump face. You see what I'm saying? But at the same time, I do feel like they could, I mean, when I say it, I feel like the scaling could be advanced everywhere, like 10 to 15%. I mean everywhere. I do still feel like the jump peaks could be, you know, peaked up another 10 to 15%, and it's only going to make that separation between your pro riders and your mid-level riders, it's only going to make that bigger, you know? If you don't have enough peak on the jumps, your average rider can get through these tracks like they ain't shit, you know? I think adding a little bit more peak to everything is only going to advance that skill gap with it. Same way as the air rail test track, I think that peakness, they're still kind of in that one-to-one scaling. Everything still, to me personally, feels a little bit rolled off. Jump peakness-wise, everything still feels a little bit rolled off to me. To be that full-blown pro air rail, supercross, whatever the fuck you want to call it, you know. Now, if you're just going in here making a little, you know, a little amateur supercross kind of track or whatever, then you don't necessarily need that. But I'm saying to make that full-blown pro air rail supercross shit, it's going to need a little bit more peak. It's going to need a little more space between that triple in to a rhythm. It's going to need a little more spacing and peak to the main supercross triple. That's the part, I mean, yeah, you can vary it a little bit. You know, I was saying before, you don't necessarily have to have any more peak on the main supercross triple or the finish line, but I mean, now that I think about it, like, it could still probably use a little bit, you know, a little more peak to even both of those. To me, now that I'm sitting here looking at my gameplay, to me it almost feels more like the main supercross triple and the finish line don't separate themselves enough jump design-wise from every other jump on the track. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel enough like, oh, okay, I'm hitting the main, you know, 80-foot supercross triple. Oh, okay, I'm hitting the finish line jump. They almost feel more like rhythm section jumps to me than they feel like main supercross or finish line jumps. You see what I'm saying? And it kind of felt like that on the air rail supercross track as well. I'm not just talking about this track right here. I'm talking about this one and the air rail supercross track. But yeah, I think everything could be expanded on, and it would only make it better. You know what I mean? The whoops are starting to get a little more dialed in. They're starting to get more like I think they should be. But as far as everything else, corners, jump peaks, triple in distance, main supercross peak and distance, finish line peak and distance, I think everything can still be expanded that like 10 to 15% more, and you're not necessarily going to lose any realism. You're just going to add more skill gap, fun factor, separation, 450, potential on the track, not have to be so easy with the throttle on a 450. You see what I'm saying? I think it would just help everything if they did that. But anyways, that's my opinion on it. We're having us a good old little time on MX bikes. Still not taking it too seriously at all. We're still just having fun with it, man. So that's where I'm at now with MX bikes. It'll be real interesting to see how these tracks develop. But yeah, man, either way, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. I'm going to give this track like a fucking, 8 overall, 9 overall, something like that. Difficulty, for MX bikes, it's somewhere between medium and hard. I still don't think they're clicking into that, what I would call like hard difficulty on MX bikes. You know what I mean? I don't think the air rail test track did that either. Yeah, the whoops were kind of janky and would fuck you up if you didn't hit them right, but still, yeah, I don't think they're tapping into what I would think of in my head as like hard Supercross track on MX bikes. I just still don't think they're quite tapping into that yet. And that's kind of what I was speaking about with the scaling and everything. You ramp everything up another 10, 15%, and then I do think you would start getting into that more hard for MX bikes, difficult, that more pro Supercross difficulty. Whereas right now, I think a lot of MX bikes guys consider this right here like hard, or this in the air rail test track like hard, pro Supercross track in the game. I really don't. I think you're just now tapping into that, what I would call like amateur Supercross skill gap in the game. You know what I mean? At least that's the way I feel about it. But nonetheless, I'm only a guy that has less than 200 hours in the game, so that should go to tell you even more so if I feel that way about it. Then it really probably isn't quite to that skill gap difficulty range. You see what I'm saying? But either way, man, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. We'll be back on that next one. Later, dudes.